should I move this away? Okay. To understand the possibilities of career options within this very broad field called real estate and economic development. And so the Lessons from Legends program is about hearing candidly about what it takes, the circuitous paths that most of you have made, and what it takes to really succeed in this world. To kick us off, I am going to give the stage to our Dean, Dean Murray DL from the Merrick School of Business.
Well, welcome, and thank you very much for everybody for coming. A special welcome also to those people who are still doing this remotely, but this is an event. I know we've been waiting for this for 2 years, and but it is great to see everybody back. And I would have to say that we've tried to run a few events this year. This so far is the highest attendance event that we've had. So thank you very much. And at the Merrick School, we really are, very proud that we are able to offer the only, real estate program for undergraduates in Maryland, and SEMA does a great job of running that, and also our board does a great job of advising us and helping us and connecting our students with the industry. I think it's a particularly powerful program for getting students into the industry, and that's what we are about at the Merrick School. And but we also do a number of other things in real estate that you know of. We have our real estate fellows program that SEMA also leads. We have some fellows here where we're actively working in the community, building projects, being instructed by a lot of people in the real estate industry with real projects, with the promise of a $1 million equity loan for the winner, and we've had some very successful projects, but it's really making an impact on the community. That's what our intention is to do in these types of programs. And most of you know about the University of Baltimore, and but I usually say this, because I have to speak for my president often, that if he were here, he'd be reminding us that we're not only the University of Baltimore, but we're a university for Baltimore. And I think we see that we've got a very special role in the city. I mean, after all, where our location is, we're kind of in between east and west. I've learned, from having been in Baltimore for 7 years, that's important, and almost sort of between north and south as well. So it's a special place, and I think it's appropriate that because we are the University for Baltimore, that we have a guest like Diane tonight, which I really appreciate, because one thing I really have learned from SEMA, by the way, and I do listen every so often, SEMA, is that it's one thing to build things, and it's another thing to develop things. But what's particularly important for the development of our communities is, creating places and sense of place. And if I know that it's going to be more extensive introductions of Diane, so I'm not going to do this, but the extensive introduction. But what I do admire about her career is that how throughout her career she has made an impact on place. And what's dear to my heart particularly is, I think that, this may be surprising as a business dean, but I think that one of the things I find is very special about Baltimore is our creative arts community. And I think that's something that we should really kind of treasure and honor and build on. And of course, as you'll hear, Diane has had a great impact on how to build our cultural communities and sense of place in our cultural communities. So that's my welcome. I think this is an event I know we've been looking for. It's an event which I have to apologize and say that I actually, having looked forward so much, I managed to double book myself. And so I'm going to be up late tonight watching this after I come back from chairing a meeting, which I'm not looking forward to. But I was okay. But Diane, thank you very much for coming, and thank you everybody, and thank you for the board for helping us pull this together. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean DL. I do want to thank all of our sponsors. There are so many of them. I can't name them all, which you can see. Many of them obviously come from our READ board. So I would love it if our READ board members would wave wave to each other, wave to the people in the room. Look at that. That's amazing. Good to see all of you in person. We've been Zooming ourselves for the last 2 years. This is a very, I like to call it the board of doers. You can't do anything on my board without having it actually mean something. So if it's not going to be effective, if it's not actually going to lead to anything, why are we doing it? And that's kind of the mantra of the members of our board, and quite probably, frankly, the mantra of everybody in real estate and economic development. So I want to welcome the current leader of our board, Adam Baker, who is our current board chair and a proud UB alum himself. Adam?
Thank you, Seema. It's great to be back on campus. It's great to see all of you here tonight. As Seema said, I'm Adam Baker, and I am the chair of the University of Baltimore Real Estate and Economic Development Advisory Board. I'm excited to hear from Diane tonight. Thank you so much for being here. You've had a remarkable career and have made an indelible impact on Baltimore and beyond. It's been 3 years, believe it or not, since our last in-person Lessons from Legends event. And I don't take for granted how special it is to be able to gather and to celebrate our industry, to be able to celebrate legends like Diane, and perhaps more to the point, just to be able to gather and be together. It's great to be on campus. I'm so glad to see all of you here tonight. I humbly welcome you. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Seema.
Thanks so much, Adam. So let's see who else is in the room. Let me tell you a little bit about that. I want to thank a lot of the key individuals who worked to set this up. We had to toe dip our way back into in-person events, so there were a lot of things that we didn't know if it was going to work. Some things didn't work, but we won't talk about that. Tashi Jelani is our administrative assistant for the entire accounting, finance, real estate, economics department, and none of us would be standing without Tashi. So thanks to Tashi. Danielle Giles is in the dean's office, who helped create all of the promotional materials. Hiro Amani and his team is helping with live stream. Thank you for being here, and all the technology work they had to do. Our student volunteers at the reception, Thomas Anderson and Nicholas Barreco, thank you for greeting everyone that came here. Every year we want to recognize our students. That's what this event is all about. We want to recognize the Reed student who has achieved highest academic honors, as well as exhibited exemplary student skills while they were here at UB, graduating this May. I have the very great honor of announcing that this year's Merit Honor Scholars is going to Kevin Haro, who I don't think could be here in person, but I do think he's on live stream. So, hi, Kevin. Kevin was an excellent student over the years. He is graduating with honors. He's very curious, one of my most curious students, and always trying to put his skills to work. And that's kind of, I think, the flavor of our students in the Reed program. It's always about what do we want to take from the classroom and put them into good work. And so congratulations to Kevin, and look forward to seeing you in person soon. So yeah, it was 3 years ago that we met here at the Lessons from Legends. That time it was with Arnold Williams, which some of you might have been there for that one. And with the help of the Reed board that year, we launched the Real Estate Fellowship Program, which the dean talked a little bit about, but let me tell you a little bit more details. The fellowship program is here to help aspiring developers, student developers, and graduates, alumni, who want to be a part of neighborhood revitalization in Baltimore. Thank you to M&T Bank, who is now our naming sponsor of the fellowship, which helps provide stipends for our students, our fellows, as well as design assistance from the Neighborhood Design Center. All of our students not only get a stipend, but they get architectural design services from NDC. And of course, our continuing partnership with Baltimore Community Lending. Sean Russell's in the audience. Thank you, Sean, for being here to provide such excellent technical assistance to our fellows and support the winner of the Pitch for a Million competition through the underwriting process after the pitch is over. New for the fellows this year, which is really exciting that came out through the pandemic, we have had very generous donors from both the private industry as well as the Resnick Foundation that created an equity fund so that the winner of the competition this year will receive $10,000 towards the equity of their project. So not just the debt side, but you're actually getting the equity side. The first year's recipient of that was Trina. Now, Trina's here. Trina was our 2020 cohort, and she was the first recipient of that $10,000, and I'm sure putting it to excellent use. So I am super pleased to announce and present to you the 2022 cohort of the Pitch for a Million competition. We have 6 fellows who are either current students or alum, all going through an intensive professional development mentoring program right now. Some of our board members have already met with them and bestowed upon them their great wisdom. They will be putting together a development program plan in the form of a pitch competition. It will be in June, and again, this year, at that time, we will be able to announce who's getting the $10,000 in equity, and they will be able to engage with BCL through the underwriting process for up to a $1 million guidance line of credit. So welcome to our 2022 fellows. If you can stand when I say your name. Thomas Anderson is in the back already standing. Amber Jones, Wesley Hawkins, Lamar Parnell, and Naquan Willett. These fellows will be making their pitch in June, and I invite you to come back. It will be in person, and you'll hear more about that closer to the day. So welcome all of our students here at the University of Baltimore, our board members, guests of Diane, and guests from the industry. And now, obviously, to move to our program that you are all here for today, I'd like to welcome Jay Brody, who needs no introduction, but he is the former president and CEO of the Baltimore Development Corporation, and our 2013 Lessons from Legends honoree himself, to introduce this year's honoree, Diane Cho.
Oh, hello. How are you guys? Spring is coming, believe me. I'm not used to speaking behind a podium. This is enormous, this creature. So, but I can see you, and you can hear me? Fine. You're going to hear a play in 3 acts. The Life of Diane Cho, Architect. I have the pleasure of doing the first act, and against the usual first acts, which are very long and dreary and go on, I'm going to be rather quick. The second act will take more time, and that's a conversation, and then the third act will be the actual award. So Diane, if you can hold on through all of this, all right? So Diane is a distinguished architect in Baltimore and beyond. Some people might say she's a distinguished woman architect. I wouldn't say that. I'd say she's a distinguished architect who happens to be a woman. And going back in my own life, when I auditioned for this role, I think I got it because that Diane's career and mine have met at different points in time. Although sometimes I was behind the, we don't have wings here, but I was behind the curtain, or Diane was the architect and I was doing something else to try to be helpful, which I was always there to do. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of that, not to dwell on my part, but to dwell on Diane's part. So, Diane has been in Baltimore since 1974. So we have known each other approximately, but not quite, half a century. That sounds like a long time, Diane. But you're right, but time flies when you're having fun. So, and I hope you've had fun all these years. So Diane and Barbara Wilks came to Baltimore after going through winters far above Cayuga's waters in Cornell, and they had enough of that. So they thought Baltimore was southern and it would be warmer. I was deputy commissioner with Bob Embry at the housing department in those years, and we hired Barbara. And Barbara did a number of designs around the city, two of which, or three of which, unfortunately are gone. They were bus stops. The last one that survived was at North and Park Avenue. And as with many things that the city built, it wasn't maintained worth a darn. That's the nicest thing I can say about it. And so it's gone. But Barbara and Diane made a terrific twosome, and the beginning of what was even more rare, a woman-owned architectural firm, very rare. So they then started to do some housing, and the reason they were able to do some was because Bob Embry and myself and Mark Joseph, who was part of our gang, we had a very delicate relationship with William Donald Schaefer as mayor, who was, shall we say, pro-road, right? Except plural, pro-roads. We were not pro-roads, and we carefully reached out for people of our inkling, including a very young Barbara Mikulski in the city council. And we took on what we not affectionately called the road gang. If my friend F. Paul is able to get a publisher, he has finished a book called The Road Wars, which if it ever comes out, you should buy a copy. Various of us were reminiscing and quoted in it and whatever. And it was because we managed to fight off the road that Federal Hill was untouched, that Fells Point and Canton, through which the road would have, like an elephant in a circus, come right through. And the buildings that Cho Wilks Benn worked on in Tindeco Wharf and Canton Cove, they would have all been gone, because there would have been an elevated expressway on its way to mate with I-95 just to the east. And you don't have those, do you? So then Diane went on to look at school renovations. I had a deal with the school department, which we would take any building that they didn't need for educational purposes. The first public school I went to in Baltimore was PS 27, Commodore John Rogers School at Fayette and Chester Street. It's still there. The building I went to is now housing for the elderly. How about that? And there's a new school next to it. The renovation of schools in the housing was one of the obvious things to me that one could do. The schools all had a central corridor with classrooms on either side. For you non-architects, if there are any, known as a double-loaded corridor. So you keep the corridor, and instead of the classrooms, you have apartments. Simple. So we did a bunch of those. And Diane and her gang pitched in. Then there was the School for the Arts. When Diane swung into the artsy, craftsy stuff, which was a gutsy thing to do. I left Baltimore thinking I would never come back because no one was doing contemporary architecture. And I wasn't going to do white columns and red bricks and Georgian details. In the time I was away at various schools, there were a few contemporary architects, and Alex Cochran hired me when it was Cochran, Stevenson, and Wing. and doing contemporary architecture, but it was slow to take hold in Baltimore, for sure. So tackling old buildings was a good thing. And the Knights of Columbus, on the corner of, I guess it is Maryland Avenue at that point, right, and Madison, we convinced William Donald Schaefer by standing under the chandelier with a roof that was leaking, that it would be a great thing for the city to buy this building. And meanwhile, our friend Mark Joseph had left our little group and had founded Shelter Development, which was a great success. And so if you look at that building as you're coming down Maryland Avenue, you would see the Mark and Patricia Joseph building, which was a wonderful thing for Mark and Pat to be able to do. And my connection, besides helping to convince William Donald, was I have 3 relatives who are graduates of the Baltimore School for the Arts. Kevin Shannon in dance, and Matthew Brody Hopkins and Melissa Hopkins in theater production. And they're off doing good. And it's an absolute wonderful place. People are full of vim and energy and whatever. And without Diane, I don't know what would have happened. Then there's AVAM. This is something I had to do with. I was at Baltimore Development, and one day, a woman named Rebecca Huffberger said, could she come in and have a chat? I didn't know her, but I said, sure. So we talked for a couple hours, actually. And she said, Jay, you know those 3 vacant industrial buildings right down where Key Highway curves? I'd like to do an outsider art museum. I said, no kidding. And I said, how are you going to do that, Rebecca? She said, well, I knew her husband a bit, Leroy. And I said, Leroy going to help out financially? Well, yeah, somewhat. But she said, I'm going to have to raise the money, 90% of the money, and then Leroy will help out. So I said, I'll tell you what. I will sell you one of those buildings for $1. You show me you can raise the money and renovate it, I'll sell you the second building for $1. You show me you can do that, I'll sell you the third building for $1. And you can put them all together. She said, it's a deal. We shook hands. So there was Diane again, right? At AVAM, right? A great success. And I had the pleasure of having another 2-hour chat with Rebecca about a month ago. And she's become a force, not only in Baltimore, it's one of the worldwide acknowledged great pieces of work. And it took architecture, it took Rebecca, it took Jim Rouse a little bit, who pitched in, and as I recall, in one of the buildings, named after him. And we liked it. So, then there's Everyman. Well, we had tickets to Everyman up on Charles Street. The restrooms were, you might say, minimal. The green room was less than minimal. And so I was interested in finding a new home for them. So I talked to Vince Lucchesi, the director, and a friend of mine, Tyson Tilden, who was on the board. And we went out looking. We looked at warehouses, we looked in Highlandtown, we looked all over the place. And through a succession of events that I couldn't have predicted, the former town movie theater passed into our collective hands and became Everyman, Diana's work. And it has a green room. It has rehearsal space. It has one day maybe a second black box. Maybe. And it has first-class restrooms. So we're almost at the end of this little thing. Everyman ran like begat, you know, so-and-so begat, as the Bible used to say. Well, Everyman begat in Diane's hands, center stage. I go back to center stage when Peter Coleman was there as the director. That's been quite some time ago. And they left, they were in other places, they got burned out. And eventually they found this former Jesuit academy on Calvert Street, led by a wonderful Monsignor, I guess, or priest, or anyway, wonderful guy named Bill Waters, who's still there running the academy. And so center stage is another Baltimore winner, is it not? It is. And last, here we go, Chesapeake. Chesapeake, Shakespeare. A building that I banked in, a historic building when it was the Mercantile Bank and Trust Company. It survived the 1904 fire at the corner of Redwood and Calvert Street. It was, the Merc left, became a nightclub, not very good, was sat there vacant for a long time. And Chesapeake Shakespeare came from Ellicott City, of all places, and found Diane. Now, when I have to say, Diane, on more than one of those illustrations, I had the pleasure of saying good things about you. And you might have gotten the work anyway, but there's no greater pleasure for people like myself doing various things in public works, public life, to be able to recommend a first-class distinguished architect. So I was delighted to do that. And in the Chesapeake Shakespeare, I have a seat in the first row at the first level, so I'm right there with the blood and guts of all kinds of Shakespearean stuff and some other stuff. So I want to thank you personally for everything you've done, and I want to thank you on behalf of generations of Baltimoreans. And one little bit from the history of architecture. You know, you architects, Sir Christopher Wren, who after the Great Fire of London won a competition, which first he was turned down, to redevelop St. Paul's Cathedral. But eventually he was chosen, and he did it. And then he did St. Martin's in the Fields, and he did a whole bunch of other churches. So one day there was a visitor to London who had just come out of a tour of St. Paul's, and the visitor said to the guide of his group, is there a monument to Sir Christopher Wren? And the guide paused, and then he said, look around. And we can say that about Diane's work in Baltimore. Look around.
Oh, can you hear me? There we go. All right. Not yet. It's on. Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear? Okay. All right. Fantastic. Great. Yeah. That's me. There we go. I know. There we go. Okay. Oh. Do you want me to switch up? This one's working. Hello? All right.
Hello?
Yeah? Okay. Okay. Well, we're good. We're getting there. We got to get the nerves. It's 2 years. We're good. So thank you all for coming tonight. It is, okay. It's been just something that I've been very excited about to do. Since we have had a while, this is feedback, I'm gonna hold it out here. Since we have had a while to prep for this, I'm excited to do this. Diane is an amazing person, amazing architect. Jay ran off a number of projects that have had a huge impact in the city. And so I'm excited to be able to have this conversation with you. And so
Does anybody know who Nikita is?
I mean, it's in the program. Yeah, we're in the program.
Okay.
Yes. I will say I am a preservation architect. I've had the pleasure of working at Quinn Evans for almost 3 years and talking with Diane. Diane was a big reason of why I got to Quinn Evans. So why don't we go ahead and take it back a little bit. When did you know that you wanted to be an architect?
Okay, so let me start with just like a 1-minute Wikipedia background thing. My grandparents emigrated from Korea to Hawaii between 1906 and 1918. My parents were born in Hawaii, and I was born in Hawaii. So I am a third-generation Asian American, which is a little bit unusual. And after World War II and the Korean War, my father decided to become a lawyer, and he went to law school at the University of Baltimore. University of Colorado. Okay. In Boulder, Colorado. So he moved the family from Hawaii to Boulder. His first job was with the Atomic Energy Commission. So then we moved to Los Alamos, New Mexico. So I grew up as a child out west, and you know, big skies, lots of nature, wonderful. And then my father got transferred to Washington, D.C. So he moved the family to the East Coast, and it was my first introduction to, real introduction to big cities, and took us to D.C. and New York City. And I fell in love with, you know, the museums, the department stores, the live theater. He knew I just really loved cities at that point. So when I was in high school, and after Martin Luther King was assassinated, watching television, all the urban riots, and I was, you know, pretty horrified. And my father walks by and he goes, "Diane, you should think about becoming an architect because somebody needs to rebuild the cities." And he knew I liked to draw. He knew I, you know, sort of toyed with being an artist or whatever, and that's not something an Asian father really thinks is in the cards, a good idea. So he suggested architecture, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I think I got a couple of books out of the library and talked to a couple of people that he knew, and applied to Cornell, got in, and started an architecture school.
I'm going to actually grab the other mic so we don't have to hang out like that. You can work it out. That's all right. All right. And so Cornell, back then, I'm assuming was not very diverse, either racially or gender-wise. So what was it like, and what were some of the challenges that you ran into being a woman at Cornell at that time?
Okay, well, at 18, you're pretty naive, so I wasn't really even thinking about diversity, but looking back, there were 60 people in the class, 4 women, and 2 people of color. That would be me as one, and there was a black guy, Abe Lee, who dropped out after a couple of weeks, but I think he ended up coming back to school and starting in the class below us. So not a lot of diversity. And in 5 years at Cornell, because it was a 5-year program, professional program at Cornell, in all of that time, I never had a single woman professor. But I didn't even think it was strange. That just white men dominated all fields. It was just normal, and any trauma that I had was just trying to get through the program, and I think the men had it too. It's just a very rigorous program. So, yeah, very different from today. I've been back to Cornell recently, and it's so diverse. It's unbelievable. I think majority women and racially completely diverse. Amazing things have happened.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you were trailblazing there. Sounds like that was a theme of your career, just trailblazing left and right. So
you don't know you're a pioneer, you're just bumbling along.
And so then, as Jay alluded to, that you just got tired of the cold up north and you decided to come to Baltimore. But really, why did you come to Baltimore? What drove you, or what called you to the city?
Okay, so Cornell was very much of a design theory school, zero technical training. They figured that you would start working for other architects and pick that up. But so in our fifth year of school, Barbara and I, we were really good friends, and we said, "God, I wonder what we're going to do when we graduate." And one of us saw this article in the New York Times, this small article on Mayor Schaefer and the urban homesteading program and what they were doing in Baltimore, where you could get a house for $1, renovate it, and obviously he had people like Jay and Bob Embry in place. We didn't know, but some really good people in government. We didn't know this, but it sounded intriguing. So on spring break, we drove down to Baltimore, and we drove all around, knowing nothing, every neighborhood, up and down Druid Hill, around the park. There was a harbor, wasn't celebrated, but there was water, and this amazing urban fabric of row houses and post-industrial buildings of warehouses and things. And we just said, it seems like an interesting place. Maybe we can actually work on a row house and build it and learn some technical skills. So we just moved here on a lark.
I love that. I know there's a number of students in the room as well. And so one of the things that we wanted to chat about a little bit was kind of the how did you know? And it's the idea that when you're driving from DC to New York at night, you don't have to see the entire path. You just drive as far as your headlights, and you keep going until you can make one decision and make the next decision and the next. So is it really just a gut feeling, just a lark?
It was just a gut feeling. It was, and you're young, so if it doesn't work out, you move someplace else. So we actually, as Jay alluded to, we show up. It was a recession, so it was a little hard, but we did find jobs, first in the private sector, working for private firms, and then eventually both got jobs in city government. She went to work for Jay, and I went to the Department of Public Works. Both of those entities had in-house design studios. I don't know if that was a Mayor Schaefer thing or whatever, but they were kind of dynamic places to work. You wouldn't think that now. And so we started, and at night, we met, by that point, we had met some other architecture folks who were a little bit older than us, and they were renovating row houses for people because it's the homesteading program. There's lots of work going on. Mm-hmm. And at night, we started helping them out, and two of the people that we meet turn out to be a couple of guys from who had graduated from Brown University, and they were roommates, and they came to Baltimore on a lark, and they saw the same things that we saw, the amazing urban fabric and this feeling that this city was on the verge of some kind of renaissance, and that would be Bill Streever and Cobber Eccles. And so we had sort of this core group of friends, and we're all, feeling the good vibes. And right. Long story short, Barb marries Bill. And Bill and Cobber had been buying row houses and, redoing them, fixing them up, and then selling them. And I think Bill was getting a little bored and started to look into bigger projects and was learning about how to finance them. And it was at this point that Barb and I took the leap and said, oh, let's hang out our own shingle. I think maybe we have a client here.
Yeah.
And let's start a firm. And we're so young at that point, at least me. I'm not married. I have no kids. I have no mortgage. What's the worst thing that can happen? I go get a real job.
Right.
So we start, and Bob, I don't know if you know this, but our first office was sublet from Brown and Craig. We took, he works for BCT, Brown, Craig, Turner. Anyway, they were so nice, they gave us a little bit of space and they let us share their receptionist typist because in those days, no computers. You had a letter to go out, you would handwrite it and give it to the typist. But anyway, that was our first office. And we just ended up starting to get more and more work. And Bill, some of his earliest projects were Brown's Arcade, Mill Center in Hamden. We did some Section 8 housing and Ridgely's Delight. And by this point, Barbara and I are getting a little nervous. We can't do all the work ourselves. We feel a little technically, we could use some help. And we wanted some more design muscle. So we convinced a couple of more people to come in to be principals. So one of them is David Benn, who was a classmate of ours at Cornell. He was teaching at the architecture school at the time. We convinced him to come down and join us. He can also sense his sense of Renaissance that Baltimore's going through. Bar Harbor Place had just been built at this point. And long story short there, I ended up marrying Dave.
Worked out.
And then we find another partner, George Holback, who is amazingly technical, just really knows how to put buildings together. Also very artistic, had an undergraduate degree from MICA, and is also a native Baltimorean. So really knows every single nook and cranny of the landscape and is fascinated with adaptive reuse. So once we had them on board, we really got rolling, and then we could extend our reach into working for other developers, because it's not really a good idea to have only one client.
Right.
You know?
And so it's, you're right.
I see Wendy Blair out there. She may have been one of the early developers. You know, in this group, I'm just going to name a few. Jay French, I think, multi-housing family services. I think Homes for America a little bit later, but there were some female developers. Wendy was one, Betty Jean Murphy, who's also African American, and Eleanor Bacon, who became clients. And really, for this girl here who had no women role models, to see these women developers talk about a man's world and taking some risks and really having tenacity. So, you know, that was really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so we built the firm up through the 80s with this new group in tow. And then I remember around 1990, Bill Streever comes up and he says, "Oh, I found this great warehouse. It used to be a tin decorating plant, and it's practically a ruin, but it's on the water, and we got to turn it into market rate housing." And I'm thinking, where is there a building like this on the water? I said, "So where is this, Bill?" And he said, "Canton." And I literally said, "Where is Canton?" It was not, nobody went to Canton. It was not on the radar screen back in those days. So just to give you a perspective of how things have changed in Baltimore. I mean, I really did not know where it was. And then, so then we did that building over. We did the building next door, Canton, Cove, over, thanks to Jay saving the road from not coming in. And at that point, we really got to be known for our adaptive reuse. You know, in Baltimore and further out. So,
yeah, because some of the other projects that I know you worked on also were like Brewers Hill, Clipper Mill, American Brewery.
And then it just, fast forward, Camden Station, we did some Mondawmin over, the American Brewery. So a lot of great projects. And a lot of people don't know, we continue to work on this, but we've completed over 2,000 units of affordable housing by,
in the city.
In the city, many in some really challenging neighborhoods. These are not glamour projects, but we continue to work on them. It's really important to the mission of the firm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then what got you out of doing some of the work for Bill? Great first client, all that. But as the firm continued to grow, how did you start getting into more of the institutional or non-private developer work?
Okay, good question. So Barbara and I had, and even Dave, pretty early on, we thought we don't want to just do developer work. We want to be there with the big guys. You know, we want to do museums, we want to do schools, we want to do libraries. How in the world are we going to get this work? And once we had a few projects, development work, under our belt, we had a couple of very lucky breaks. And both of them had to do with women's schools. The first one is Bryn Mawr School. And when you're in the institutional realm, you don't just get a job like you do from a developer on a handshake. You have to compete. You go up against 5 other architecture firms. You turn in proposals. You get interviewed. And somehow we convinced Bryn Mawr to hire us for this project that they were going for. And they had a dynamic head of school, Barbara Chase, and a forward-thinking board who said, "We are a girls' school. We need to have role models for these girls, and here's a women-owned firm let's hire them. And so we did a good job there on the first building, and we ended up staying at Bryn Mawr for about 10 years and doing 3 more projects there. And during that time, we also got a break at Goucher College, another women's school at that time for sure, and another dynamic leader. Rhoda Dorsey was the president. Another dynamic board took a chance on us, and we ended up staying there for around 10 years and did 4 projects there. So those really helped. And then once you start getting those kinds of projects, then we went on to where we worked at most of the universities, including University of Baltimore. Brian is the principal in charge of one of the projects here. We've worked at Morgan, UMBC, you know, many of the schools, and also outside of Baltimore. And around 2000 was when I kind of found my niche, is when I met Rebecca Hoffberger, and I met the gang at the Baltimore School for the Arts, and got to work on 2 incredible projects. The Jim Rouse Visionary Center, the conversion of the Whiskey Barrel Warehouse for AVAM, and the renovation, which was big for us at the time, $25 million, of the Baltimore School for the Arts, which combined all of my interests, the old buildings. At this point, historic tax credits are in use, so both buildings had the benefit of using those. The arts, my thing going back to my childhood, and education. And the visionary leadership at the school, and of course Rebecca being such a force. I mean, the whole process of working with these groups and working on these projects was just so great. And that became my niche, and I decided that's really what I wanted to do. And so I parlayed that experience into Everyman Theater for Vinnie Lanchisi, and Center Stage with Kwame Kwei-Armah. And then I'm now working at the BMA with Chris Bedford. And so it's been a great ride. And at that time, when I kind of went off on doing cultural work, we have enough diversification in the firm at this point. And so the principals are all following their separate passions. And Barbara, who in her heart had always been loving urban design in the public realm, she went back and got a landscape architecture degree. And then she went off to New York to start a landscape architecture firm. I think Baltimore is just too small a pond for her. She's very ambitious, very successful. And David liked urban planning, campus planning, libraries, and housing, so he went in that direction. And then there was George, who never gave up his love of adaptive reuse in the old buildings. The more ruined the building, the better he liked it. He didn't care what the use was. He just wanted to do them over. So and that's pretty much how we rolled, is Cho Benn Holback.
Yeah, so that's when it became Cho Benn Holback after Barb went back up to, or went to New York.
And then we made George a principal, yes.
Yep. And so I know that Cho Benn Holback has still name, and staying power in Baltimore, but it's no longer the name of the firm. So you sold to Quinn Evans a couple of years ago. So talk to us a little bit about how that came about and that decision.
Okay, so we were just getting a little bit top heavy for one thing. We had some amazing people, a few of them are in the room tonight, younger principals who had stayed with us for many years, and they needed a place to grow. We just weren't big enough, I think, to, a healthy, economically, architecture firm is shaped like a pyramid. You know, you've got the sellers at the top and the doers at the bottom, and we needed to be bigger. So that was one reason, and another one was George, David, and I are all the same age, and we would be retiring at the same time, and it would be quite a burden to have to buy us out. So we talked to the younger principals about perhaps merging or selling, and they were behind it. And so we talked to some management consultants. One of them said, "Oh, interesting. I'm working with a client, Quinn Evans, who's looking to open a Baltimore office." And it turns out all 3 principals knew Carl Elefante, who was one of the principals there, and we started talking, and it took a year, but then it all kind of gelled, and they bought us.
Yeah.
And one of the things we liked about Quinn Evans is we shared a lot of same markets. They did a lot of historic preservation. We were a little bit more adaptive reuse, but they're very related. They did a lot of cultural work, being headquartered in DC. lots of education, higher ed and K through 12 schools. The one thing they were missing was housing, but that's what where we came in. And while the firm is headquartered in DC, they have 4 other regional offices, and 3 of them are in what I'd call sort of second-tier cities, Baltimore, Detroit, and Richmond. And I think there's a synergy. If Sandra Little, raise your hand. She's a principal from the Detroit office. There's a synergy there between those firms because we share a lot of the same challenges, a lot of the same opportunities. And I think we like working at kind of a community and neighborhood scale rather than trying to make a big mark on a national scale or something like that. And so that was another appeal of the firm. And Nikita, I know you came into the firm. What made you come in?
I did. So part of it was, so I used to co-manage a small architecture firm that I was trying to emulate Cho Benn Holback. So I was like, oh, woman minority-owned firm that is doing amazing sustainable historic preservation. That's exactly what I want to be doing. But an opportunity presented itself to join the Baltimore office. And so it made more sense for me to join the firm as opposed to trying to grow a firm separately. And then I was also like, well, Diane's there, so I get to like work out and hang out with her, so absolutely.
I think it's so cool that Nikita had her choice, but she chose the Baltimore branch.
I mean, yeah, Baltimore's kind of amazing. I'm just going to throw that out there. And so now that we're getting towards the end of the program, we still have a little bit of time. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about your challenges and opportunities that you've seen and experienced over your career. And so I guess I'll start with the elephant in the room. Are you happy you stayed in Baltimore?
You know, I am. I think Baltimore, something about the size and the number of challenges it has, you really can make your mark here. I don't know if you feel the same way, Bob, but I like that aspect of it, and the fact that there have been other people, the clients, that also were able to do amazing things. I mean, where else could you be a Rebecca Hofberger with no money and have this great idea about a visionary art museum, and someone will give you 3 buildings for $3?
Right.
Or I think Vinnie Lancisi was at Everyman was working in a bowling alley and wanted to get have a bigger venue, and so he buys the Old Town Theater for $1 and 30,000 square foot building, and is able to expand Everyman, and now we have another major creative venue, a cultural venue in Baltimore. And so I think, and it makes a difference when these places open, because we're not a huge city, so it really makes a big impact when they open. So yeah, I'm happy I stayed.
Good. We're happy and grateful you did as well. And so then over the course of your career, you've been a business owner, a wife, a mother, a daughter, a neighbor, a friend. What are your thoughts on work-life balance, and how did you navigate all of the different roles that you've played over your life?
So I think I was very lucky. This sounds like a cliche, but it does take a village to raise a child. I have a great husband, totally willing to share in the responsibilities. And both being firm owners, it was easy to kind of coordinate schedules. Both sets of our parents were nearby, and we could afford, we're very lucky, quality daycare. And so it really worked out for us. I have the perspective of seeing so many mothers, well, dads too, come through the firm and try to negotiate this. And what I've learned is don't judge. There's like a million parenting styles. I've seen everything from the helicopter moms to the loosey-goosey, laissez-faire style. And by and large, if those kids are loved and supported in the long run, they really turn out fine. You just have to hang in there and not fuss too much.
Yeah.
And then, this 2 years of this working from home, I think has got to have helped a lot of the working parents, just as an option for them. And I don't know, Nikita, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think the working from home definitely has helped. I know I don't have kids, but I know that there is also the tension between being a stay-at-home mom versus being a working mother, or versus being a woman who chooses to stay childless, and kind of how that has evolved and shaped careers or not. So I think it's interesting that the options have increased as time has gone on, which has been so necessary, particularly in times of COVID. And so then when you were raising your family, or I guess early motherhood, did you have any of that tension between being concerned about staying or being a stay-at-home mom versus being a working mother versus?
Well, I think every mother, right, moms, when you're at work, you're feeling guilty about the kid. And when you're with the kid, you're feeling guilty about work. But here's the interesting thing about working from home, because I'm working with some younger architects that are raising families. And you would, 2 years ago, if you had asked me, what do you think about working from home? I would have thought, well, production will definitely go down. Actually, it's the opposite. I think it's gone up. Because what used to be your 9-to-5 job, it's now 24/7. I am getting, I get emails from my teammates at 10 p.m. I get it on weekends because this is when they are working in, because, you know, the computer's right there. They can just pop on. And I think it's actually increased production. Strangely, it's kind of weird, but
yeah. All right. And so then, anything that you regret?
All right. I do think I wish I had been more patient and kind with a lot of the people that I work with. I'm kind of impatient by nature, and you know, I think, gosh, I could have been kinder, or you know, said a nicer thing or two. I was watching the Ketanji Brown Jackson hearings a little bit, and her composure, I was like, oh, I need some of that. I wish you know, because obviously look where she's been, and she seems to have done it in such a nice way. Yeah. And then, do I have any other regrets? Not that I can think right on.
Do you think that any of the needing to, or feeling like you wanted to be nice had anything to do with being a woman business owner, or having to make space for women at the table since there weren't that many in the industry?
Oh, it's an interesting thought. Maybe. I could use that as an excuse. That's why I had to be really aggressive when I was younger. I have a little bit to do with it, but still. See, when I saw her, she was...
Yeah, she was class and poised.
Pretty good. Yeah. So
yeah,
I think it's doable. I think you can be powerful and be nice.
Okay.
How about that?
I like it.
Okay.
All right. So, any tips for emerging professionals?
Well, I would tell a lot of the younger architects in the office to get out from behind the computer, get into the field, get on site, learn how buildings are put together, get out in your community, especially if you have particular interests, get out and see how the world works, and make as many relationships as you can, because I think if you just stay in your little architecture bubble, it's not a great thing. I volunteered. Doreen Bolger, who used to be the head of the BMA, asked me to volunteer on her Building and Grounds Committee at the Baltimore Museum. And so I did that for a while, and then they liked me there, and so they asked me to be a trustee. So I served as a trustee there, and I'd done a stint as a trustee at Everyman, and I'm now currently on the board of MICA. And it gives you this perspective of how the clients think. Because if you think they're talking about architecture and what a wonderful world that is not what they are talking about. They have real issues, real challenges, and it's really good to hear what those are and to be involved with those, so that when you do work on those types of projects, you're just a better architect. And I just think I see too many of the young ones just sitting behind the computer all day.
Right, waiting for permission to go and be great or volunteer or get out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that makes sense. And so then it's been such an honor to be able to sit here and talk with you and learn from you, and I'm so grateful to you to share your story with all of us. And so as we're wrapping up, I'd love to know, what challenges and opportunities do you foresee ahead for the profession?
I think the biggest challenge right now is climate change. It used to be something that we used to think was in the future, but it's here. And this is such an important role and that architects can play. You know, now we have more clout because it's a really big issue, and the younger the people that come into the office, the more anxious they feel about it. And I've recently come to learn that 40% of carbon emissions are from buildings. You know, it's not just energy consumption, but the manufacturing of the materials, et cetera. So I think it's a huge challenge, but it's a great role for architects to play.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree, particularly because building reuse is climate action. It's one and the same. So I guess with that, we're going to go ahead and end it there on a positive note with climate change and the fact that we have some work to do. We're going to go with that. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm the senior principal of BCT Design Group and an advisory board member of the READ program. Thank you very much, Nikita and Diane, for speaking to the conversation today, and thank you, Diane, for all your contributions as an architect to the real estate community. I think it's really important the recognition of this award be served to an architect. Not the first architect, Jay was the first architect, but the first for architecture and your work. So thank you very much for your work. With a small token of our appreciation for you.
So nice.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Thanks everybody on live stream. Thank you, Diane. It was so nice to meet you and to learn about your career. And welcome back to University of Baltimore. We will do this again, and stay with us in June when we do our pitch competition. Good night, everybody.